Hello, my name's James Bundy, and I'm the Director of Operations for Freedom Declared Foundation. Thank you for joining us for the latest interview about the state of freedom of religion or belief within the United Kingdom. I'm delighted to be joined today by Simon Calvert, the Deputy Director of Public Affairs at the Christian Institute. Thank you for joining us today, Simon.
It's a pleasure.
The first question that we ask all our guests is, how do you define freedom of religion or belief?
Well, of course, the starting point is the definition that's in the international treaties. So, we've worked most often with the definition in Article 9 of the European Convention on Human Rights. And so it's the right, individually or collectively, in worship, practice, observance, to hold and to manifest your beliefs. But that definition, of course, is an attempt to try to write into a legal format a basic human right, a basic human instinct, a right that's often been trampled on in many different ways. And so I think of it in terms of the ability of an individual to be consistent with their own thought through value system, because of course, as we all know full well, Article 9 protects religion or belief, and it is so it's not only religious beliefs, it's other kinds of convictions that people may have, coherent, worked through kind of life-governing convictions. And I think it's important to recognize and respect the ability of the individual to think through their view of life, and to formulate a coherent view, and to adopt a coherent view of life that they learn from somewhere else. I make no bones about it. I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian in the evangelical tradition. And so, I wasn't brought up a Christian, so I used to be, more of an agnostic, and then in my sort of mid-late teens, I converted, and so I know what it means to have one set of beliefs and to exchange them for a different set of beliefs. I know what it is to change your mind. In the Christian tradition, we use the word repentance, which essentially means, a change of mind at a fundamental level. I know what it is to disagree with a worldview and then change my mind and to come to agree with it, because I didn't agree with key aspects of the Christian faith when I first really heard about it and thought about it. And since that time, in my own experience, has been being a part of a church community and hearing teaching from the Bible, because evangelicals have a very, very high view of the Bible, which challenges me, every day, and certainly every Sunday, challenges me to change my mind about some things where, according to God, I'm still wrong. And so the freedom of religion means that the freedom to be able to embrace a different worldview, and the freedom then, when you're in that worldview, to be able to embrace it in every area of your life. And we often hear people say things like, well, we need to keep religion out of politics. And I think, do you not realize how incredibly repressive that would have to be? Because what you'd be saying is that people whose worldview is not religious can allow their politics to be influenced by their worldview, and can try and encourage other people to embrace their worldview. But people whose politics is influenced by religion are not allowed to do that. Why? Why make that distinction? And why take away the ability of religious people to be consistent with their own belief systems? So I think freedom of religion is the freedom to to live in a way which is consistent with your belief system across the piece, and also the freedom to try to encourage and persuade other people to join you in those beliefs.
Yeah, no, that is very interesting. And one thing that I did pick up on at the very start of your answer was that Article 9 of the European Convention is trying to draw up a legal definition of a fundamental human right. Do you think the definition in Article 9 sums it up well, or do you think it falls short in any particular bit?
So I think it falls short when it comes to the ability of people to live out their lives, because it tends to focus on manifestations of religion or belief in a sort of a corporate sense, in a sense of worship and observance. It's not always clear that means, stuff you do outside of church. Now, I would argue that in Article 9, the word observance does incorporate everything I'm talking about. But I don't think other people always understand that, because again, you will hear people say, in effect, if they're talking about introducing a particular law, and we say, look, we're concerned that this is going to cut across our religious freedom, they sort of say, well, it doesn't affect your freedom to go to church and to do that religious thing, that funny religious thing that you do. So what are you worried about? They don't have any sense that your faith applies to the whole of your life. They don't have any sense that your value system as a Christian is kind of written through you, hopefully like a stick of rock. You cut it open and it's there through across the piece. And so I do worry that there is a narrow understanding of what Article 9 means, and could wish that perhaps the wording had been a bit clearer. I mean, I worry too about the fact, I'm a lawyer by training, although, I work in campaigns and public affairs for the Christian Institute, but my background is in law. And it always strikes me that whenever you pick up any new book on human rights and on the European Convention, the chapter on Article 9 is always the thinnest chapter, and that concerns me. I think it's a greatly underdeveloped right, and so I think there is a need to, just to try and improve people's understanding. I mean, the big problem, the reason why courts and politicians and journalists often take a narrow view of religious rights and rather sort of skeptical and frankly, rather unsympathetic. One of the reasons for that is just the cavernous religious illiteracy that we now have in the UK. And that is the responsibility of the church itself to solve, for religious people and churches and in my context, if evangelical Christians, if we want people to better understand the Christian faith and to better understand how we interpret the Bible, then it's our job to explain it to them. And that means not, keeping our faith to ourselves, not keeping our heads down, but, in a hopefully wise, sane, sensible, persuasive, winsome way to try and explain what we believe, in order to try and sort of create space in the public square for our beliefs, and in order to try and help those who do adjudicate on our human rights to better understand where we're coming from, and hopefully to sympathize a bit more with us.
Yeah. So it sounds like you believe that Article 9 could be interpreted to include the public sphere, but religious illiteracy has resulted in it being interpreted to religious freedom in the private sphere, but when you enter the public sphere, leave it behind, and you can just don't bring your religion into it.
Yes, I certainly think in terms of the way the typical British politician, the typical British journalist thinks about things, I would. Judges are required to think a bit hard about these things, but still they are influenced by that same culture, and they can, I've been involved in enough cases to be able to see that sort of look of comprehension which flickers across a judge's face when a witness or an advocate is trying to explain a Christian point of view to them.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to hear about some of those cases, so we get some examples where you believe that politicians, judges have came to the conclusion that you have to leave your faith behind in the public sphere. So is there any cases just now that are occurring?
Well, I mean, let's start with the Ashes Baking Company case. People are perhaps of all the cases we've run most likely to have heard of that one. It concerned a Christian family-owned bakery in Belfast. They were asked to ice a cake for a gay rights campaign event, and the slogan that this gay rights group wanted on the cake was "Support gay marriage." And after careful consideration, the family decided that they didn't want their business and their family business to be associated with that campaign. They didn't want to help promote that campaign. So they very politely declined the order. They had a very cordial conversation with the gay rights activist who said he appreciated, how well they sort of handled it and spoke to him. But then he went to the Northern Ireland Equality Commission, and they helped him to bring a legal action, and he sued the bakery. Now, the final outcome of that case, as people may know, was that we won in the Supreme Court, but at the county court, we lost, and at the subsequent appeal, also within Belfast, we lost again. And yes, I think part of the problem there was this lack of comprehension of Christian beliefs about marriage, this lack of understanding how if you believe, very strongly as a matter of deep religious conviction that marriage is between a man and a woman, then to lend your skill, your labor, your art, your efforts to help promote a political campaign to change that definition in law is impossible from a conscience point of view. And the way, in fact, that we won the argument ultimately on that, both in the court of public opinion as well as in the court of law, was by helping people to think of scenarios where they could be in the same position. And so we argued from the beginning that if you can force a Christian baker to bake a pro-gay marriage campaign cake, then you could force a gay man who is a baker to do a cake attacking gay marriage. You could force a lesbian couple who run their own T-shirt printing company to print T-shirts with the slogan that that homosexuality is an abortion. You could force atheist web designers to have to design websites for Christian evangelism or promoting Christian views on different things. And what we said was nobody should be forced to help promote a campaign that they profoundly disagree with. And that argument resonated. People connected the dots. It wasn't just these funny religious people with their funny views not wanting to support gay marriage, which apparently, 5 minutes ago we didn't agree with it, but now we all agree with it. So, let's just go with it. People could see it wasn't just that. They could see the principle at stake applies to all of us. But it took £500,000 and an appeal to the UK Supreme Court to actually win that argument in the court of law.
So yeah, that sounds like the freedom from coercion won that legal case.
That's right. Yes, it was the concept. So with our lawyers, we obviously we were able to work with the lawyers representing the family, and we were able to develop the argument of compelled speech, which is more well developed in American jurisprudence, but is now thanks to the Ashes case, much better developed in our own jurisprudence. And this is the idea of compelled speech, is the idea of that a natural and obvious concomitant of the right to freedom of expression, freedom to express your own views, is the right not to be forced to express other people's views that you disagree with. And that's the concept of compelled speech, and that's what won the day. I mean, it was also important to say that, you know, in the Ashes case, that that the customer was able to go and get his cake at a bakery around the corner in plenty of time for his event. So it wasn't like he couldn't get his cake from, you know, 20 other bakeries in Belfast. The question was, should he be able to force this one bakery that didn't want to do it? And it's important as well to stress that this was not a matter of the bakery saying anything like, we're not serving you because you're a gay man. We don't like gay people. It wasn't that at all, never was. And again, that, you know, the court accepted that. But at the lower levels, there was this sort of assumption that not agreeing to help promote same-sex marriage meant the same as you not liking gay people and not wanting to serve gay people. And there was a lot of confusion, I think deliberate confusion, introduced into the case in the media by some of the gay rights groups who were sort of saying that, oh, this means that gay people can't get served. Rubbish. The individual, the gay man who came into the bakery, had been served there many times. That's why he went for his gay marriage cake, because he went there previously. And as the family made clear again and again and again, as publicly as they could, they would happily serve him again. And equally, I think as Daniel MacArthur, the manager of Ash's Baking Company, said, you know, if my granny came in and asked for this cake, I wouldn't have given it to her either. It was all about the message on the cake and nothing to do with the messenger. So that's a very, very important distinction.
Yes. Is there any other examples of religious illiteracy leading to court cases, or just cases in general where people feel that their freedom of religion has been infringed?
Well, I think I should mention Peter and Hazel Mary Bull, Christian couple who ran a B&B from their home. They had a large building on the southwest coast, and some of the rooms were turned into bedrooms, but that they rented out. And they had on their website actually a policy, and this we're talking 2008, and the policy said something like, because of our high view of marriage, we only rent out double beds to married couples. And this rarely sort of came up, but occasionally over the years it meant that an unmarried opposite sex couple would come and stay, and they'd be given separate bedrooms. Now a same-sex couple booked a room, and it wasn't clear they were a same-sex couple until they arrived. The couple explained, the owners explained that this policy meant they couldn't give them a double bed, and the two men had to go to a B&B down the road. And understandably, they weren't very happy about that. But I think rather less understandably, they sued the Christian B&B for it. Now, again, the point here is this is just the couple being consistent to their own belief system in their own ambit, in their own home. Should somebody have a legal right, whether they are an unmarried heterosexual couple or an unmarried same-sex couple, should they have a legal right to say, no, you must give me a bed. If you're renting beds out, you must allow us to share a bed. For this couple, it was a matter of deep Christian conscience that they couldn't and wouldn't do that. But sadly, the courts didn't recognise that. There was some sympathy for them from the judges in the higher courts, but the ruling eventually came down against them. And again, I think, you know, that's a principle which doesn't just apply to Christians, and I think that it was regrettable that there wasn't more sympathy for that. And interestingly, if memory serves, I think we did get to the Supreme Court with that case, and I certainly do remember that the president of the Supreme Court, Brenda Hale, later gave a speech in which she expressed sympathy for this Christian couple and suggests that perhaps the law, because it was a case about equality law, perhaps could better accommodate people in that situation. So there is an understanding that our laws don't always properly accommodate people's consciences, and that perhaps something better could be done for them. And again, that doesn't have to mean that gay people can't get a place to stay. It's about a reasonable accommodation, not an unreasonable accommodation of the religious principle. If you're the only hotel on the island, then I think same-sex couples ought to be able to have somewhere to stay on the island. But if in fact there are 20 or 30, surely in a culture that claims to be all about diversity and an understanding of people's different views, surely you can afford to have one or two of those B&Bs take a different view, especially where, as I said, it wasn't a principle aimed at same-sex couples. It was a principle aimed at marriage and applied more frequently numerically to opposite-sex couples than it did to same-sex couples.
And you were just talking about the law and reasonable accommodation. Is there any legislation going through any parliament in the UK that concerns you in regards to freedom of religion or belief?
Well, I think I would want to mention the issue of banning conversion therapy. Now, as soon as you say that, people, they've read the horrific stories of gay people being physically tortured, and they think, well, of course you should ban that. But just take a few steps back. The reality is, of course, that physically or verbally abusing a gay person or anyone else is already against the law. And when you actually look at what the activists calling for this ban are really interested in, they are profoundly theologically motivated. And what they're really concerned with is churches, typically evangelical or traditional Catholic churches, that teach the Christian sexual ethic, that sex is for marriage and marriage is between a man and woman. Now, people may not like that point of view, but everybody knows it is the mainstream Christian position, has been for 2,000 years, and it holds no animosity against anybody. But when you look into the detail of what activists mean when they talk about banning conversion therapy, I mean, the humanists, for example, they say, the ban must include banning repentance. I mean, that's astonishing. Humanists UK actually put their name to a briefing paper saying the conversion therapy ban should involve banning repentance. Now, we know that they're anti-religious, but to actually want the law to reflect that anti-religious sentiment to ban repentances. You look at the leading activist on this issue, Jane Ozanne. She was directly asked, about does she want to ban gentle, non-coercive prayer? She said, oh, yes. The ban must include gentle, non-coercive prayer. So for those of us who thought that banning conversion therapy was about protecting people from abuse and coercion, we suddenly find it's not about coercion at all. It's about the content of what you pray. Well, I mean, in this country, we learned long ago that having laws criminalizing people for praying the wrong kind of prayer are profoundly counterproductive and wrong. You can't and shouldn't do that. But so far, in a lot of the media discussion around conversion therapy, the journalists haven't got this point. They haven't got to this. They're still thinking that we're talking about protecting gay and trans people from basic abuse, and that somehow those of us who have concerns about conversion therapy are defending abuse. That's their religious illiteracy. That's not our position at all. And so anyway, when legislatures around the UK are legislating for this, they're going to have to tread very, very carefully. We took advice from Jason Koppel QC, leading human rights barrister, and we posited various everyday church scenarios. The woman sharing her faith with a friend at work, the pastor preaching a sermon where his lesbian friend comes in to the church, and hears his sermon, the parents whose daughter says she's trans, and the Christian parents who try to encourage her to, embrace the fact that she's female. And we said to Jason Koppel, would these things be caught by a conversion therapy ban? And we invited him to look at the kind of definitions that the activists like Azan and others are promulgating. We asked him to look at the definition from the state of Victoria in Australia, which has adopted a conversion therapy ban. And he said, yes, in the right circumstances, these ordinary church activities could become unlawful if the UK were to go down the same line. And we said, and wouldn't that breach human rights? And he said, yes, of course. It would put the UK in breach of its obligations under the European Convention on Human Rights, Article 9, Article 10, Article, is it 11, Freedom of Association? I forget. Several rights will be engaged. And so the legislatures are going to have to be very careful, because if they pass the kind of conversion therapy ban that activists want, they are going to put the UK in breach of its obligations under the European Convention. And for that reason, over the last year, we've been instructing law firms in England, in Scotland, and in Northern Ireland. We've had them write to the respective governments, enclosing a copy of Coppell's opinion and saying, basically laying the groundwork for us to judicially review the law and to judicially review the governments if they do pass this kind of excessively broad, religiously repressive law of the kind that the activists seem to want.
And only last year, we saw the Scottish Government infringe on Article 9 of the European Convention as found in the Court of Session in Scotland. So how should activists, members of the public, members of Parliament go about in their everyday life to make others, particularly those in positions of power, aware about what Article 9 actually means and how to protect it and enhance it?
Well, that's an excellent question. Well, firstly, as I've already said, we need to talk about what we believe. We need to rehabilitate our beliefs. We need to explain them. The problem at the moment is a lot of us keep quiet. And that means that the only people talking about what we believe are often people who are deeply hostile to what we believe. And they misrepresent us, and they misrepresent our motives, and they misrepresent the intent and effect of what we believe. Whereas if we get to describe our own beliefs in our own words and get to talk about our own experiences and our own attitudes, then we can rehabilitate those beliefs, and we can demythologize them, and we can dispel these rather unpleasant, negative mischaracterizations of what we believe. And then the second thing is to talk about human rights, to talk about religious rights, to help to just popularize that discussion that, in a society in which, we claim to have a strong commitment to equality and human rights, that rarely benefits religious people. And that's wrong. Both equality and human rights law both contain clear, strong protections for religious people and for religion or belief. And we need to help people to understand that. You have this situation where sometimes politicians can act and behave as if these rights don't even exist. I've seen official for example, I've seen official guidance for employers, which is given to churches without any recognition whatsoever that churches, when they're recruiting people to work with them, are exercising Article 9 rights and also rights protected under Equality Act. The official guidance doesn't even acknowledge the existence of these things. So I think it's up to us to try to popularize the very concept that there are such things as religious rights.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why Freedom Declared Foundation did start, because we believe that there is a lack of understanding about the importance of freedom of religion or belief within the United Kingdom. And one of the reasons for that is a growing religious illiteracy and belief illiteracy within government, within public bodies, and within just the general population. And that's why we're conducting these interviews as well, to get people's perspectives from all faiths and none, and from various backgrounds. So the last question that I would like to ask you is, where should the United Kingdom be focusing on when aiming to improve implementation of Article 9?
Well, on the balancing of rights, on recognising that that religion and belief rights exist, and in recognising that they need to be part of the equation, they need to be part of the balancing exercise. That's really the number one thing. That sometimes, as I say, these discussions can take place as if these rights don't even exist, and there's no attempt to balance rights, whereas they do exist. And going back to the Ashes case, we won on that case because the court was prepared to engage in that balancing exercise. It was prepared to read the relevant legislation in a human rights compliant way, and it was prepared to recognise the rights which existed on both sides, and to come to a balancing exercise and an accommodation. So I think, a balancing of rights, all the rights, everybody's rights, that will be a great way to start.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Simon. For those who are listening and want to see more of these interviews, please do subscribe to Freedom Declare's YouTube channel, and follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. And thank you, Simon, once again for taking the time out to discuss freedom of religion or belief within the United Kingdom. And keep up all the good work that you're doing at the Christian Institute.
Thank you, and likewise.
Thank you.